Welcome back to another episode of First Pitch 305, the Miami Marlins podcast for LemonCityLive.com. Now, you can mark this down for season 2, episode 7 of First Pitch 305, and I'm your host, Alex Aguirre. You can listen to this podcast on platforms like Apple and Spotify, and you can listen and watch this podcast and the many other great podcasts that Lemon City Live has to offer on LemonCityLive.com. Now, for this episode, guys, I'm flying solo, and we have a lot to unpack. Since the last episode, the Marlins were looking for their first win of the 2024 season. At the time, they were 0-8, and they just started and dropped the first game of a road series against the Cardinals. After that last episode, the Marlins dropped the middle game of the series against St. Louis, but in game number 10 of the 2024 season, the Miami Marlins finally got their first win of the season against the Cardinals by a score of 10-3. Now, I'm going to go back to this game specifically because there's a lot of significance with what happened in this game. 10 runs is a lot in baseball, and for the Marlins, that is a big deal. So we're going to talk about the offense a little bit this episode and bring you guys up to speed and the outing by Max Meyer on that day. We're going to get to him as well shortly and the news revolving around him with the team and the questionable decision that was made. But since our last episode as well, just to give you guys a quick recap, that win gave the Marlins were 0-8 prior to the win and prior to that episode. So then since then, the Marlins have played 16 games. And in that 16 game span, they are 6-10. So it's still a record below 500, but they got that win. They got that out of the way. And they've added a few more in that frame. So now they are 6-17 in the 2024 season. They're very, very, very much bottom dwellers. Still a long way left. There's still a long season. You know, Eli from Fish on First, he made a good point on his podcast saying that any team in Major League Baseball, and I'm a believer in this because it can happen to anybody, to any team, but any team in baseball can have an 8-game stretch, an 8-game losing skid. Just an 8-game stretch, even more of just really bad baseball, a 10-game span of going 2-8. That can happen to any team. The Dodgers, the Braves. Heck, look at the Astros. You know, they've been dominant for so many years, and they were out to a pretty bad start. You know, the Marlins and Astros, for I think the first handful of games of the season, they were the only winless teams. You know, but the Astros, they have obviously more talent in that ball club to turn things around. But I'm just trying to make a point here that type of bad baseball can happen to any team, to any organization, no matter what type of talent you put on the field. And since that first win against St. Louis, they avoided a sweep against St. Louis. Then they went to play against the Yankees. And against the Yankees, they avoided a sweep as well. They got one win against the Yankees, and that's tough. You know, they're off to an electric start. That is a super, super tough lineup to go up against, no matter who you have up on that mound. So at least they avoided the sweep against the Yankees. Then they came back home. They played Atlanta. They won 1 of 3 against Atlanta. Those are always tough games. I think one of those games was a close one. Then they played the Giants, and that was a tough series. They did win one game in that series, but they had a chance to get a couple other wins, maybe win that series. You know, get 2 out of 3. The Marlins have been playing a lot of closer games since they were 0-8. The games have been a lot more competitive, I will say for a fact. And then coming off their last series, they played against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field, and they got the series split. So they still have not won a series yet in 2024, but I'll take the split based on how they're playing. You know, on the Cubs, they got some good names. They got a former Marlin there, Garrett Cooper. He's having a decent season so far. And a series split's a series split. You got to take him when you can get him, especially with this Marlins team. And right now, like I said, they're 6-17. And, you know, they're going to start a series now with Atlanta, and then they're going to come back home. So things, you know, I'm not saying they're going to turn it around because, you know, starting a series against Atlanta, but they have a chance to kind of just climb the ladder and chip away a little bit, especially with the Nationals coming to town this weekend. This ain't the same Nationals team, though, however. You know, they got a couple of good names, you know, especially on the mound with Mackenzie Gore. Then they have Joy, and then in the lineup, they have Luis Garcia, Joey Meneses, CJ Abrams. They got some decent names in there. That this isn't the same Nationals team that they were, the same pushover for the last couple of seasons. And the Marlins have had their number. This is going to be a little more competitive, and it's not a surefire win by no means, even against the Nationals. And that shows you right there how difficult already this NL East division is for Miami. And that's pretty much it in terms of this quick little recap, bring you guys up to speed. And going into our next topic, we're gonna get into the pitching side of things. I know 6-10 since getting that first win. 6-10 isn't the greatest record. They're a little bit more competitive, as I said, and they've had some news. Go in the 16 game span, and the headlining news and a big head scratcher for a lot of fans, including myself, is the demotion of Max Meyer back down to AAA. I've heard this term used a lot, especially in fans in the media circles, is babying. Are the Marlins babying these pitchers too much? And we talked about it a little bit last episode with Kevin and Danny, some of the guys from Fish on First, in terms of are the Marlins babying these guys too much? And we gave different examples. I remember mentioning Steven Strasburg when he first came up to the majors with the Nationals, and how he was on a innings limit, pitch count, and we're seeing that more and more and more with these young pitchers. And it just so happens that it's super common with Miami because they have so many young pitchers. They have that's their strength. That's what they had a lot of depth in the minor leagues. And when you have all these young guys and you're trying to create a core for the future, or at least I'm hoping they are, but when you're trying to do that, I understand you're going to be more on the conservative side of things and be a little more cautious, but at the same time, I think giving them leash is good. Max Meyer, it's a different story, though. I know you're always cautious with young pitchers, but this is, an incident as well. I wouldn't call it an incident, excuse me, a situation where, Max Meyer is coming off Tommy John surgery. He didn't compete at all in the 2023 season. He only made I think 2 starts to begin his MLB career in 2022. And then they had to shut things down. So he's making the comeback. I understand that progression, but Yuri Perez is another example. They babied him. They had him on the innings limit and everything, and they were very cautious with him last season. Tommy John surgery. So I understand both sides of the coin. I get it. And, the head scratching part, though, even more, it's not about the babying. That comes with the territory of young pitchers, especially coming off Tommy John surgeries or major surgeries and injuries. The more head scratching moment is he's been their best pitcher, hands down. Hands down. In 3 starts this season, Max Meyer's 2-0 with a 2.12 ERA. And the Marlins sent him down. And the Marlins, during that time while he's going to be in the minors, he's going to, every time when it's his turn to pitch in the rotation, his outing is going to be in 3 inning stints in AAA. And so then we go back to that debate. Is that babying too much? Is 3 innings really, what is he going to get out of that? Is that going to progress even more? Is it going to be 3 innings every outing for the rest of the season? So these are all questions that are still not answered yet, that a lot of fans would like to know. What is the outlook? What is what are the expectations with Max Meyer this season? I understand that the Marlins are not competing for anything yet. We'll see. I haven't lost complete hope. Just throw it out there on the season. Thank God for the expansion of the playoffs, and the teams that they're allowed to play and whatnot. But as of right now, the Marlins aren't playing for anything. It looks like it. And Peter Bendix and the Marlins front office, they said it without saying anything, that they're kind of phoning this season in. I've heard my colleague here at Lemon City, Gabriel Garcia. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. He's one of many, many fans that has said this, that the Marlins are kind of phoning this season in without saying it. And I don't want to get to that level yet. I don't want to, bring my expectations to that point yet. It's still very, very early in the season. But this is not, I wouldn't say concerning, but it's just like, why? Can he continue this, rehab or this progression at the major league level in like 4 or 5 inning stints? maybe, and it gives him that MLB experience. So it's not that back and forth from the minors to the majors. It's that consistency in terms of from a competitive standpoint. And that's for where I lie is the point of him going to the minors then is what then, just to get easier reps. He's here at the majors already. He has shown he can compete. If you want to have an innings limit on him, fine, but what's the point of him going down to the minors to compete against lesser talent, and then when he's finally readier or healthier, he's going to be going back up to the majors, and it's kind of just a revamp of like, okay, this talent's a little bit better. We're in the big leagues again. you know these hitters aren't the same. They're more capable of hitting breaking balls and just and pitches that have a lot more movement, and he relies on that movement, especially with his slider and his cut fastball. So I just think this demotion was not necessary. He could have gotten the reps up at the major league level. If you want to have an inning limit on him, fine. It's not like this bullpen hasn't been worked already and they're calling guys up and down to pitch in meaningful innings, and they're not, I guess, meaningful pitchers. So it's just been a complete, I wouldn't say dysfunctionality, but it's just been very, very questionable on how the Marlins are handling this starting rotation, especially with Max Meyer. And and sending him to the minors to have these 3 inning stints does not guarantee, and I'm, knock on wood, does not guarantee that he will have any setbacks physically. I hope that nothing happens, but still though, it's why, like, I think there are plenty of other pitchers in this Marlins rotation and in the bullpen that deserve a demotion if you want to give them quote unquote more reps or just more time to concentrate and hone in on their skills, a la AJ Puck. On my last episode, I mentioned if this AJ Puck experiment it doesn't work out, put him back in the bullpen where he has shown some success, and you give a little bit more depth to that bullpen because they're struggling right now, and they need help. Instead of calling up, I'm not gonna call them no names. They deserve to right. They've earned the right to make it to the majors, but there are certain names in that bullpen that should not be pitching in the 8th and 7th innings of close one-run games, winning or losing. They shouldn't be in that position. And I just feel like Max Meyer being sent down, you just shrug your shoulders and be like, okay, just another thing to kind of just like shrug your shoulders at for this unfortunate 2024 season, or the start of an unfortunate season. And going back, as I mentioned, to that start and that 10-3 win against St. Louis Cardinals, that was a Max Meyer outing. And the significance of that outing, it was a quality start, and it was against a good team in the Cardinals. But game number 10, 10th game of the 2024 season, was the first game this season that a starting pitcher went at least 6 innings. Let me say that again. In the 10th, it took 10 games for a starting pitcher for the Miami Marlins to reach 6 innings. And then he followed that up with another 6-inning start against the Atlanta Braves, their lone win in that series at home. He went 6 innings. He only gave up 1 run and struck out 7 Atlanta Braves. So that was his last start before being demoted. Is against the top team in the division, one of the top teams in all of baseball, and he took it to them. A superb start. I know there's only quality starts, but if you want to categorize it, a superb start for Max Meyer there. And then he's getting sent down. So that's my take on Max Meyer and what I think of his demotion and how I just don't think it makes any sense. Less stressful innings maybe in the minors to just to get back into that MLB shape, or just to get back into 100% strength in that arm. Okay. So it's not the high intensity moments, the stressful innings, and you want to overthrow and put more stress on your arm. You might see that more often at the big league level if he was still here. Maybe I'm not going to speak for him. So it's just another decision made on the ultra cautious conservative side that I really don't I don't necessarily agree with. But hey, we'll see when Max Meyer will be up again at the major league level. Only time will tell. He's, like I said, just honing on his skills at the minor league level. But that was a great, and probably one of the only good sights or shining moments for this really, really poor start to 2024. Maybe him on the pitching side of things, and then Jake Berger on the offensive side, even though he's down with an injury. But we'll get into the offensive side of things in a bit. Moving on to our next category in the pitching rotation is the man who is replacing Max Meyer in the rotation, since he's now in AAA, is Edward Cabrera. And, this is not, just to clarify here, this is not going to be a segment of bashing Edward actually for taking Max's spot. In a perfect world, based on how Edward has pitched since he's been back, and Max Meyer, how he's pitched, ideally you want both those guys in your starting rotation. But then again, I don't work for the Marlins front office. But let's get into some of Edward Cabrera's numbers. He is 1-0 in 2 starts this season. He with a 3.27 ERA. In his first start of the season, it was against the Giants. And here's the thing with Edward. He went 6 innings. He went 6 innings, struck out 10 San Francisco Giants, and only gave up 1 earned run. And then I'm sorry. He didn't win this outing. However, George Soriano coughed up the game in the following inning, in the 7th inning. And that's just another wound for the Marlins, and for them that they haven't handled yet, or they haven't patched up yet, because the bullpen is still a bit shaky. They've righted the ship a little bit, but not completely. But the first 10 to 15 games of this season were very, very ugly for this bullpen. And it's not the first time, or Edward's start was not the first start that the bullpen has coughed up, a quality game, a quality outing. So, but then in his second start, he went 5 innings against the Cubs. He gave 3 earned runs, but he struck out 7. And he went 5. He gave you a decent start, and the Marlins earned the win during that game. And that's how, he was part of getting that series split against Chicago. So, hey, in 2 starts, if that's what you're getting from Edward every time, 5 to 6, maybe if you can push it for 7 innings, but if he's in that range and he's giving up 1 to 3 runs, heck, even if he doesn't give any runs, even better, obviously. But if he's giving up 1 to 3 runs in that range, and he has those high strikeout numbers, 7 to 10 strikeouts, then you'll take it. And he's showing you the stuff that he has. He has that explosive fastball that that can hit in the upper 90s. But then what really stands out for a lot of people and a lot of fans is that incredible changeup, and that high velo on the changeup. That changeup can touch 93, 94 miles an hour, which is, insane. But he's showing you that he has the stuff and the potential of this rotation as well, with him, Max, a healthy Sandy, a healthy Yuri, and then and a healthy Braxton. Or, that 5th spot, it's kind of up for grabs now, because, Ryan Weathers has done an exceptional job as well. He's reached the 6th inning in that lone win against San Francisco. It was a Ryan Weathers outing, and he went 6 innings as well. So in the last 5 to 10 games, the Marlins starting pitchers have definitely cleaned up their act a bit, especially in the walks department. AJ Puk, not so much. Weathers has definitely, with his location and his command in the strike zone. And now we're seeing starters go 5+. We're not expecting, especially a lot of these guys in this rotation, go 7-8. It's especially the way the game is today. That's not going to happen very often. Guys like Sandy and what they can produce on the mound in terms of stamina and endurance, it doesn't happen very often anymore. So it's just, getting 5 to 6, maybe a little bit over 6 around there, amazing, especially from these guys like Edward and Max, who did it earlier in the season. And that's what you can expect from other guys like Braxton. Trevor Rogers, too, I can't leave him out as well. Trevor Rogers is finally getting correcting and improving his command, because him and Puck were struggling big time. It was just, a lefties thing, I guess, for the Marlins. Weathers, Puck, and Rogers were horrific to start the season in terms of command, getting 3 to 4 walks every outing. And Rogers is definitely getting in line as well behind Weathers in terms of gaining control of the zone, because they all have really good stuff. Weathers has speaking of velocity, he throws in the upper 90s as well with his fastball. And Rogers, he did, last couple seasons his velocity hasn't been there, but he still has decent secondary pitches to be a bottom of the rotation piece. So the potential is there for this Marlins starting unit, but that's just a big what if right now for the future plans for this rotation, because we definitely have heard Jesus Luzardo in trade discussions, and that's still not off the table, especially with the Marlins with the way the Marlins are trending. If it stays this way, they're going to be sellers, and especially Peter Bendix hasn't said anything, but it's very clear that the Marlins are not, prioritizing winning or being extremely competitive. So if things stay the way they are, Jesus Luzardo could be off the table, and and that's just another piece in this Marlins rotation that has amazing stuff, electric stuff, and the what if of Luzardo thrown into the mix of pitchers that I've just mentioned, how great they can be. We might not be able to ever see that version of that starting rotation, like I just mentioned, with Luzardo being still on the trade block, and just the how these guys are going to be back, how they will be when they come back from injury, and Sandy and Yuri. And Braxton, he'll be back soon, but the long-term injuries in Sandy and Yuri, these are all what ifs right now, and just maybe, I guess, something hopeful to look forward to for the Marlins and their future. So that's Edward Cabrera. I have nothing bad to say about him. He's definitely shown, because his biggest thing was control as well, especially in recent years. But in that outing against San Francisco, when he went 6 innings and struck out 10, only walked 1. So that's a good sight to see. He's definitely plugged the hole, I guess, in the absence of Max Meyer, because that's the last thing the Marlins needed right now, is that you send down your hottest starting pitcher, and then the person you call up, Edward or whoever, they don't get the job done, or at least are close to replicating what Max has done. And Edward has definitely done that for sure. So I'm happy for him, and we'll see what he does continue for we'll see how his season turns out. There's only 2 starts, so I'm not going to be like, this is going to be Edward for the rest of the season, but it's a great start to his 2024 campaign, and he still has a lot to grow and mature into his long and lanky body. He still has plenty of room to improve in terms of physically, which can only add more to his velo and just his command and just everything. So I'm looking forward to Edward, because I don't know, I feel like that this right-handed trio, this 3-headed dragon, kind of, because they're all super tall and lanky, with Sandy, Yuri, and Edward. That's pretty devastating to face on the mound. Then you got explosiveness on the other side with Jesus and Ryan Weathers. So yeah, no, I can go on and on about the what if of this rotation. My last episode, I compared it to the what ifs of this the New York Mets rotation in 2015, 2016, in that era, with Steven Matz, Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom, that what if. And so hopefully the Marlins don't get to that point. The potential is still definitely there, and no one has been traded yet. So that's going to recap. And that's going to, I guess, finish off my takes on the starting rotation. Definitely has, there has been an improvement, and they're reaching 5 innings at least. They're not, putting so much work on the bullpen. The first 15 games of the season, around there, the Marlins bullpen actually recorded more innings pitched than all the starting pitchers combined up to that point. That's a terrible recipe, for any big league team. I don't care what type of arms you have in that bullpen. They will get burnt out by the time you reach the middle of June and you're in the All-Star break around there. They're not going to have much left in the tank by the time you get to August and September. So This definitely helps in terms of kind of giving guys a day off, at least giving guys a breather, letting guys go just maybe one inning instead of two, or a little over 2 innings. Brian Hoeing has been a godsend for this team in terms of just cleaning up the mess, just not having skipped, needing to use extra guys, and just going out there doing his job, throwing strikes. So but like I said, not many bright spots on the pitching side of things. Maybe in the bullpen, Brian Hoeing, and then in the starting rotation, Max Meyer, and now Edward. I will say that Ryan Weathers has definitely cleaned it up a bit as well. If I were to say my final thought on the starting rotation is, for the Marlins starting pitchers, for what they have right now, AJ Puck is the odd man out. If they need to make any changes, if they're gonna make a call up, or whatever the case may be, he will, in my opinion, he's the odd man out. Everyone has kind of had their bumps and bruises and kind of recovered and regrouped and bounced back, except for him. So we'll see what the decisions the Marlins make moving forward. Or if they don't really care and just want to, not be competitive, then yeah, keep him out there. But he should be the odd man out if they were to make a decision on the starting rotation. Let's move on to the bullpen here. And, the bullpen has had their ups and downs, no doubt. A lot of downs, especially to start off the season. And one guy I want to talk to specifically is Tanner Scott, the closer for this team. I was, going into the season, I was saying not many bright spots in the offseason. Very, very quiet and very, very underwhelming offseason for Miami. So you had to pick your players, or I guess make your predictions with a positive outlook, and to try to make that this past offseason somewhat entertaining. And one of the bright spots that I was looking forward to for this season was Tanner Scott. Tanner Scott had an incredible ending to the 2023 season. He was National League Reliever of the Month for the month of September. And so we were hoping that, he's going to ride this momentum into 2024. He finally, found his groove. He solidified himself as the Marlins closer. So that was one of the few things the Marlins had any concerns about, and me personally as well, going into the season, was okay. They got their closer. He's got the stuff. He has shown that he can go in there and take charge and get command of the zone, because closing is so hard. You got to get in there and throw strikes right out of the jump. No, don't mess around, and you can't walk anybody. You can't give free passes, and that killed Tanner Scott to start this season. And right now he has 3 saves, so he's picked it up a little bit. Like I said, guys are kind of turning things around, shaking off the rust, getting into that 2024 groove. And he has 3 saves now, but I guess, just like a lot of guys, I'm not trying to single him out either. Him and a lot of other players, you pick a player, you can name a specific moment where they have contributed to a loss for this season. And the big one that stands out for Tanner Scott is that blown save against Atlanta. The Marlins had a chance to, win that game, take 2 out of 3 from Atlanta, which would have been incredible. But these are the little moments that add up once you played a 162 game season. So against Atlanta, he gives up a 3-run home run when the Marlins are leading 7-6, and he gives it up to out of all players to Marcell Ozuna, former Marlin. And then the Atlanta Braves, and at the top of the 9th inning, and the Atlanta Braves end up winning 9-7. And that's unfortunate. He's bounced back. He got a save against the Giants in that lone win of the series, and in the series split, against the Cubs. He recorded a save as well, his 3rd save of the season, and that was a one-run win. Marlins won 3-2 that game against Chicago. So that's a good sight to see, that he's turning things around, that he's finding his control again. There was another outing as well. I forgot which series it was, but it was at home, that he walked the bases loaded. You can't, and I don't believe that was a save situation. I think Skip was throwing him out there for a different scenario, because it was some time that he was used, so just to get some reps. But still, though, you can't walk as any reliever. You can't walk the bases loaded. It's a hard jam to get out of, and you just dug yourself a grave practically. So um, we haven't seen that type of command or that lack of command recently with Tanner. So that's good. He's finding what he was doing in September and going in there, throwing strikes. The velo's getting up there again because that was the thing as well recently, especially during that blown save against Atlanta. The velo wasn't really there, and that's something that I like to give a shout out against Eli from Fish on First. He pointed out as well. A lot of these pitchers, especially in the bullpen, their velo was down. Tanner's one of them. Andrew Nardi is another one. He normally was hovering around the mid 90s. Now he's in the lower 90s um, with his fastball. So maybe it's just they're not they're they're not, I guess, quote unquote warmed up for this season, or the body's still trying to get in that MLB daily grind, and then we'll see that velo tick up a bit. But what doesn't help though is that the usage. Tanner not as much because there hasn't been a lot of closing situations. But with Nardi and other arms like Brian Hoeing and Anthony Bender, the velo is down for Bender as well. So hopefully that we'll see some improvement in that. But for the most part, Tanner and other names, they've picked it up a bit. Guys like Nardi and George Soriano, who blew that game for Edward against San Francisco. Guys like that, they've had a rough start. George Soriano gave up a big home run against Mike Trout in an Angels series that coughed up that game. So, not that many positive signs for the Marlins in their bullpen, but they're turning things around little by little. So hopefully, collectively, the bullpen and the starting rotation collectively, they can propel this team to some more wins or hold down some leads to get them some more wins and get back into this race, or at least try to make this season somewhat competitive, and catch up to the Nationals, for crying out loud. But we'll get into that discussion another day in terms of how they do in that series. But let's wrap things up here in this episode with the offense. So prior to the start of the series against Atlanta at Atlanta, and after the series against Chicago, the Marlins offense was pretty much in all offensive categories, bottom tier in the MLB, hovering the low to mid 20s in a lot of offensive categories, and they're 22nd in the MLB in runs scored. Before that Atlanta series, Marlins have scored 85 runs in 2024 and have allowed 123. That was kind of the outlier. And their playoff run in 2023 was their run differential was horrific. I think historically the worst run differential for in playoff history. Granted, the expansion rules for the playoffs have helped teams like the Marlins, who definitely relied on better quality starting pitching compared to this year, better bullpen execution, and just winning one-run games, being able to lock down games, especially, like I said, coming from the bullpen, but also just having enough offense. And the Marlins have been inconsistent there. At least last season, it was competitive enough with paired with good enough pitching. Now, obviously, when you have subpar pitching all around combined with a subpar offense, you're going to get a record more like this. Maybe not 6-17, because the bullpen has had the bullpen and the starting rotation has led to a lot of losses. But yeah, that, like, the way the Marlins are playing right now, it is a recipe for a sub 500 record. But like I said, maybe not 6-17, maybe 10-13 around there, maybe, or like 8 wins, give or take. But yeah, but when you have players, and let's get into the specifics here now with the offense, when you have a catching platoon that is hitting, or one of them doesn't even have a hit this season, and the other one's hitting 0.83, yeah, that's not going to contribute to a lot of wins. I know catchers, they're relied more defensively, but they got to produce something, for Christ's sake. Jacob Stallings was doing more than that last year for the Marlins, or during his tenure with the Marlins. Nick Fortes is hitting 0.83, and Christian Betancourt, his platoon mate behind the dish, He hasn't gotten a hit this season in 23 plate appearances, but now he's on the IL. But still, though, in 23 plate appearances, not a single hit. So yeah, moving on to, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, one of the bright spots on offense was Jake Burger. In the last homestand, he had an oblique injury and it was bothering him. He tried to play through it for a couple of innings, but it was just bothering him. And especially, that those type of injuries when you're swinging a bat, that's just very uncomfortable. And so he's on the IL. He was their main power threat with 3 home runs, and he was leading the team and still leads the team with 15 RBIs. And that's a bummer. That's a huge blow to this team when they need all the help they can get offensively and in the power department. As I mentioned, the catching platoon, there's no power. They can't even get a hit. So there's no home runs there. Jesus Sanchez, who they were relying heavily on to supply the pop from the left side of the plate, he finally hit his first home run in the Chicago series. It was a bomb. It was like 460 feet straight away center field over the batter's eye. But still, though, I'd rather take a handful of home runs that scrape over the wall than one massive moonshot in Wrigley Field. So he only has 1 home run. Josh Bell, him and Berger coming back or being with the team for this season, and Tanner Scott were my 3 picks for like what I was looking forward to this season. And Josh Bell, before this Atlanta series, was hitting 198 with 3 home runs. And yeah, like that's the meat of your lineup. That's the middle of your lineup. And now I'm going to go into another player or talk about another player. I'm going to eat my words a little bit, and I'm going to take this L. It's still early in the season, but I still wish him the best. I hope this is a great year for him. But Bryan De La Cruz, boy, did I not expect this start to the season. I remember during the first couple series of the 2024 season against Pittsburgh and the Angels, I was sitting in the press box and I was, seeing the lineup, and every day I see Bryan De La Cruz at DH hitting cleanup. I'm thinking, why is he hitting cleanup? This is prior to Jake Burger getting hurt as well. Why is he hitting cleanup? I don't understand this. Is he that big of a power threat, or am I just thinking too old school? Do I have too much of an old school mindset of like your number 4 hitter's got to be that slugger, that Jorge Soler? But now you see guys like Jorge Soler and Giancarlo Stanton hitting in the 2-hole. So of just the logistics and the numbers behind having a guy like that hitting in the 2-hole. I understand that the production has shown and the quality has been there in those situations for those hitters. But for Bryan De La Cruz hitting in, cleanup, I never understood that. I questioned it completely. And he was not off to the greatest starts this season. But boy, in the last couple of weeks, his bat has definitely picked up. DLC, he leads the team with 5 homers and has 14 RBIs, which is second on the team. And he's hitting above 270, which not many players are on the Marlins right now. So if you're hitting above 270, that's good. That's good right there. And DLC is definitely up to this point because of Jake Burger's injury. We don't know how he would have been playing if he didn't get hurt. But right now, Bryan De La Cruz is the best hitter on the Miami Marlins, and I did not expect that whatsoever. Close to 30 games into the 2024 year. Going into some other names in this lineup, Jazz Chisholm Jr. We all know that he made that transition into playing center field last year. Defense has definitely improved. I wouldn't say he's a standout center fielder in Major League Baseball, but the improvement has been there, and just him showing that, yes, he is a natural athlete that can take on the challenge and show improvement and make strides in that regard as well. So, but from the offensive side of things, Jazz, I would like to see Jazz's batting average a little bit higher. He was hitting 231 before the series against Atlanta, and he had 2 home runs with 10 RBIs. So, he is another bat in the middle of your lineup. You would like to see that, ramp up a little bit. And he does have 4 steals, which is good. But Jazz can cause so much damage with his wheels. And when you hit 231, that means you're not getting on base enough. So I would like to see maybe, just that batting average go up a little bit so he can create, some problems on the bases, get in scoring position, and get in position to score so it can be easier for those guys that come behind him. Because, like I said, this Marlins lineup does not have a lot of depth, has some injuries right now with Jake Berger, so it's all hands on deck. And Jazz just, being more of a consistent contact hitter will be so beneficial for this team in terms of getting on base and just stealing bases and getting in scoring position to, you know, make a difference, make an impact. Marlins are not going to light up the scoreboard. So every run is a big run. So Jazz 231, that can definitely improve for sure. He definitely has the capabilities. Another player, and rounding things off here, I got a couple more players I just want to highlight here before we close out this episode, is Nick Gordon. I actually was excited when they acquired Nick Gordon in a trade with the Minnesota Twins. They traded away Steven Okert. I didn't expect I would be missing him so much in terms of how the bullpen has been performing, because Okert was a pretty good piece for the Marlins the last couple of years out of the pen. But, the way the Marlins are and the way things are in the minor league system and in terms of position players, if you want an improvement somewhere or just shake things up in the lineup, you got to trade. You can't really call up, or you can't try to fleece a team or anything like that. You got to, make a trade, and you got to give up a decent piece. And the Marlins did in reliever and left-handed reliever, Steven Okert, but they got Nick Gordon, a good utility piece. I did not expect the Marlins to be trading away John Birdie right before the season started, especially when he played practically the whole spring training with the Marlins. But at least they did that trade for Nick Gordon before the whole Birdie situation. So, and Nick Gordon, he plays, short or second, third, short. Like, he plays all over the infield, plays the outfield as well in the corner spots. So that's great to have. And he is a lefty. So it would have been nice if Birdie was still on the team to have that, utility combination of a righty and a lefty. You live with the trade. The Marlins got two prospects in that trade with the Yankees. We'll see what happens with them. But Nick Gordon, he's been a decent acquisition so far. He's got 3 home runs and 12 RBIs. 2 of those home runs have come in big spots for Miami, very clutch and situations. I know one of those home runs was a pinch hit home run. And he's got 12 RBIs, and he's hitting .233 on the year. That can definitely improve, but I wouldn't be surprised if it hovers around there for the remainder of the year. But that's a good sight to see. 3 home runs from Nick Gordon. They're going to need all that power, especially from that side of the plate. As I mentioned, he's a lefty. Jesus Sanchez only has 1 home run so far this season. So, I'll take it where I can get, especially with Nick Gordon, who I don't expect to be a huge source of power, unlike Jesus Sanchez. So, and last but not least, and sticking on the topic of power and home runs, is Avi Garcia. Now, going back to Daniel Rodriguez from Fish on First, and joining him for his podcast, Big Fish Small Pod. Prior to the season, Avi Garcia, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just pointing this out. Avi Garcia was my pick for, I guess, standout or breakout offensive player for the Marlins. And my reasoning behind that was because of the absence of Jorge Soler. He's now obviously with the San Francisco Giants. And Jorge Soler was one of the top home run hitters last year for Miami, and was the premier home run hitter for Miami, and one of the top home run hitters in all of Major League Baseball. He was their big RBI man. He was the middle of that lineup, or hitting 2-hole, for that matter. But still, though, he was a huge part of that lineup. Stayed healthy pretty much all year. Helped that team get to the playoffs, and you lose that. So that's a huge hole to plug up. I'm not saying Avi Garcia is doing that. By no means, he's not. But I do want to point out he does have 2 homers. He is playing in a more of a reserved role, platooning, getting the start when there's a lefty on the mound. But, it's a good sight to see. He has 2 home runs. That's 2 more than a lot of other guys on this team. And so hopefully he can continue that. I know that pretty much fans have had it up to here with him. They've had enough with him. he's on his last leg with this team in terms of like if he doesn't perform, the team people are saying they should cut ties with him. I'm not going to be hypocritical either. I did say that like this is make or break for Avi as well, but I was pulling for him because he's had a career in Major League Baseball. It just so happens, I guess, unfortunately, all that success or all that consistency as a Major League player that has not transferred over to his tenure with the Marlins. But he's playing in a different role now. Hopefully, he can find success being more of a platoon guy. And he's definitely, with what he's getting paid, he's definitely not. He definitely shouldn't be being a platoon guy, but his track record recently with the Marlins in the last couple of seasons says otherwise, and which is why, even though for all the money that he's making, one of the highest paid players on the team, he's coming off the bench and having spot starts here and there. And that's the way it is. He's kind of earned that in terms of just his lack of performance. But I'm not saying he's gonna. He is my pick in terms of big fit on the Big Fish Small Pod episode I had with Danny Rodriguez. I'm not saying I'm sticking by it. I know I'm wrong. There's going to probably be somebody else who's the breakout candidate. The LC is definitely showing that he's the one, or probably will be the one by the end of this season. But as long as Avi can stay healthy and be consistent against hitting lefties and just performing when he gets that opportunity, he can finish this year with maybe 15, maybe 15, 18 home runs, give or take. And, that's a pretty good season. Definitely does not fill the shoes that Jorge Soler left, but it's still a positive, I guess, season in terms from compared to the last couple seasons he's had with Miami. But yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for season 2, episode 7 of First Pitch 305. I appreciate everyone sticking around for this episode as I flew solo here. I'll be sure to come back next episode with some guests and with more takes and more opinions on what the Marlins have been doing recently. I want to get some guests on for next episode and talk about, and what they think about the Max Meyer demotion. But yeah, not a lot of other big news going on with the Miami Marlins. They're going to be back home again. Like I said, to play the Nationals this weekend. So we'll see if they can capitalize on that. As I mentioned, this ain't the same old Nationals from the last couple of years. But it's still an opportunity for Miami to get some wins in that win column and continue climbing out of that cellar. As I said before, I have not thrown in the towel on this season. I still believe in this team in terms of making it competitive, try to hover around 500 and just give a reason for for fans to, check out a game at the ballpark and just have a good time, because this team has definitely shown, even in this small sample size, they can be competitive. They've dropped some tight games that in different circumstances or with different players or in different situations, it could have translated into wins. But there's still a lot of room to grow, a lot of improvements to be made, and I'm not done with this team yet. It's going to take a lot more for me to give up on this team, and that's going to do it here for season 2, episode 7 of First Pitch 305. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and the other great podcasts Lemon City Live has to offer on platforms like Apple and Spotify, and you can listen and watch the podcast and the other podcasts Lemon City Live has on lemoncitylive.com. That's going to do it here from First Pitch 305. I'm Alex Aguirre, and remember, let's go fish.